Good afternoon and welcome to the LFS podcast Euro special after the quarter-finals of Euro 2024. Good afternoon, welcome to the programme. I'm Caoimhan Ferris, and over the next 30 minutes, 40 minutes, however long, I run for an hour last time, but 30-40 minutes I'll be running through all the quarter-finals, their results, what I thought of them, what were my thoughts and feelings, and then going through our semi-finals. Two semi-finals that are set up to be very exciting. I'll also look ahead to those and give my prediction on who I think will be going through to the Euro 2024 final, which, by the way, is just 6 days away. This Sunday we will be crowning our European champion. It is flown by after so much football we've seen over the last 3.5 weeks. It's been an incredible journey. Started with Germany, Scotland on the Friday night, and we're here 3 weeks later, ready to crown our winner, just 6 days away. Exciting indeed. Right, we're going to start with the quarterfinals, of course. Now, I did in the last podcast. I run through the groups, the round of 16, and a quarter-final preview, and I want to go back to some of those points as well. So I will be hopping back in between both during this. But let's start then with the first of our quarter-finals, and that was Spain against Germany. And of course, Spain, one of our first semi-finalists to be confirmed, beating the hosts by 2-1 in extra time. In that one, a very exciting game. That was Anthony Taylor, the referee. Not that that's important, but he was. I've wrote some notes down. About each team, how I thought they played against their quarterfinal team in their quarterfinal, and then what I think they will be like heading into their semi-final. But we'll start with Spain, because they were the first team to be confirmed as a semi-finalist after beating the hosts Germany by 2-1 after extra time. They took the lead in that one. Spain, not long into the second half, Dani Olmo gave them the lead. Germany then equalised in the 89th minute. Florian Wirtz scoring the equaliser, descended to extra time before in the 119th minute of extra time. They kept us waiting, but in the 119th minute of extra time, Mikel Merino scored the ultimate winner to send Spain through to the semi-finals. Ultimately, it was a very interesting game. It started very stop-start. It was quite kind of bitty, very kind of physical, and kind of, what would I say, kind of gritty in that sense, that both sides were really getting to battles, the early challenges, a lot of free kicks early in the game. It wasn't that free-flowing football that we've seen at times in Spain's games. That was mainly down to the fact of the way Germany approached the game, to be honest. I think Germany came into that first half saying, we're not going to allow you to play your cutesy tippy-tap of football. We're going to put hard challenges in, and you're going to find yourself having a tough afternoon. We're not going to make it easy for you. And of course, the game played in a very raucous stadium, of course, where those German fans certainly making their voices heard. Let me tell you, they were very, very noisy. Those German fans inside that stadium almost packed it all out. It was a majority of white in that stadium. In the MHP Arena. I was just trying to figure out what stadium it was in Stuttgart, but it was a fantastic kind of atmosphere around it. But one point I did make about Spain, they weren't as dominant against Germany, and look, I wasn't expecting them to dominate Germany as much as they did Georgia, or even in previous games with the possession, the kind of control, the attack and threat. I was expecting them to be composed and calm in possession, which I did see at times. At times they were a bit panicky, a bit kind of rushing the passes, not being as composed and calm as probably what they could have been, and that ultimately led them to be less dominant because there were more turnovers in possession, which then put them on the back foot slightly. And I also mentioned about lack of cohesion at times from Spain. We've said how fluid and how kind of free-flowing their football has been, so how wonderful to watch it's been in the attack and third. In previous games, it was a bit more kind of sticky, a bit more kind of stifled in that sense in that game against Germany. And it's credit to Germany and their defending and the way they played the game, but Spain weren't allowed everything to go their own way in a sense, and they kind of struggled with that at times. I mean, losing Pedri very early in the game, and we'll talk about what impact that could have for the semi-final, but losing Pedri early in a game is not is exactly the opposite of what you want, because that midfield three, he was took off in the 8th minute. Pedri got targeted 2 or 3 times in those 8 minutes with those early German challenges. But I said, and I kind of jinxed it in a sense. I don't want to put it down to me that Pedri's injured, but I said that if Spain kept their midfield three fit and on form, Pedri, Rodri, and Fabian Ruiz, if they kept them fit and on form, they would be a tough nut to crack, because that three in midfield looks so fluid, so confident, so controlled. They can spring a pass, and I said they've 3 different attributes that you need in a team, and especially in a midfield. Rodri's got that kind of calmness, that composure, that leader's mentality of, I've got the ball and I can find you. I can recover the possession. If we lose it, don't worry, I've got you. I can recover it. Pedri's got that youthful exuberance, that kind of ability to carry the ball forward, but also that skillful essence to kind of break into the box, those late runs. Fabian Ruiz, similarly, he can carry the ball, he can pass the ball, he can run with the ball. He's got those little attributes, and that midfield three together would have really caused any team a problem. And I think that kind of hampered Spain in the game, losing Pedri so early on, because it kind of disjointed them in that first half, and I think they kind of struggled to really get their attack going in that first half, to be honest. I mean, I look back at the stats from that first half. Yes, they had more shots than Germany, but they weren't creating much with them. Ultimately, in terms of good goal-scoring chances, so they were struggling to keep it up top, and struggling to really get the effect and make their change. Dani Olmo, bringing Dani Olmo on, making that change kind of effective and working within the Spanish system. It struggled in that first half. They fixed it in the second half, ultimately, but in that first half it was struggling, and Pedri, I think losing Pedri was a key component to that. But ultimately I would say it was a professional job from Spain. I'd say they didn't panic. They didn't kind of go what we see from teams is when you score early on or score early in the second half and you have a long half to go, you kind of scramble at things and lose your way a bit. I think they kept control of it for a long time. I think Germany did struggle to really threaten for the majority of that second half. They did have better possession in spells, Germany, but I think Spain held them to pretty half decent chances, if that. But when they got their goal, Germany, they had a really good last 10 minutes, the Germans, and they had to. You know, they're the hosts, the pressure's on them, they're in the home country, they need to perform, their fans are behind them. So they had that strong last 10 minutes of the normal time, and they delivered in the 89th minute. They were creating really good chances at that point, they were building well, they were controlling the ball well, and they were keeping the pressure on the Spanish defence very well. But I would say is that Spain didn't panic, they didn't rush to things, and they weren't kind of disheartened by the fact that they were pegged back, that it went to 1-1 and that we were going to extra time. They actually kind of thrived off the extra time, I would say, Spain, because ultimately they had this fight back mentality of, no one's done this to us before, you know, we've not seen this before, you know, and I felt that Spain were like, you know, we're not going to have this, and they kind of had that arrogance within them, that good arrogance. Sometimes arrogance can be a bad thing in games, but that good arrogance about Spain, where they did kind of say, look, we're not going to let you have this. Yes, you may be the host, yes, you may have all this behind you, we're not going to let you have it, and we're going to win this. And I saw that in extra time. I saw that kind of energy about Spain, that kind of feeling that they were out to win this and they were going to win it. I think they were highly creative in the second half. Their defence was strong ultimately, but one thing I would say is they can be got at, and I'll talk about it more when I talk about their matchup with France a bit later on, but they can be got at, Spain. They can be caught in transition on the counter-attack. That is where we saw Georgia get the joy out of them in that round of 16 game. And that's really all we've seen of a frailty of Spain when they do push bodies up and they love to press high in that intense press. Where if a side breaks out of that press, they can be vulnerable on the counter-attack. So that's something that I will come back to. But as I said, they dealt with extra time well. ultimately Spain, and they took the kind of bull by the horns, as they say, and kind of ran with that and that momentum in the second half. Ultimately, it was Germany that you felt would have had the momentum going into extra time, but it was Spain that actually had the momentum. It was Spain that performed and Spain that showed up and got the job done and got their way through. Ultimately, a great goal, a great moment for Mikel Merino. But I'd say Spain slightly deserved it a bit more. It was a very on a knife edge game. It could have been anybody's game. I mean, I could be sitting here talking about Germany going through and probably say similar things. I don't think there was much between the sides in the game. I think at times they both struggled in moments. But I'd say Germany struggled a bit more. I don't think that was down to maybe the pressure of the moment, the game, the opposition they were up against, all the storylines about Spain, how they were probably one of the best sides in the tournament up to that point, and maybe that affected Germany a bit. I don't know, but who knows? It might have done. But ultimately, I think Spain dealt with it well. Of course, no Pedri will be an issue. Of course, Carvajal got a second yellow card in the game. Morata got a yellow card for celebrating, so they will both not be involved in the semi-final. It's going to be tough for Spain. It's not going to be easy with those not in that game. The likes of Carvajal, Morata and Pedri, three very good players, three kind of cult figures in the side for very different reasons that aren't going to be there against France, but we'll see how they deal with that. One thing I would say, although the Spanish wingers struggled a bit, I think Lamine Yamal rose above that. He got the assist for the first goal, Dani Olmo's goal. I mean, he rose above that kind of pressure. And I want to go back to the point that I've made previously. Young players in this tournament don't know what pressure is. They just don't. I mean, we've seen from their performances, they don't know what pressure feels like. They just playing with freedom and that confidence and that kind of ultimate thought of, I'm better than you, I know I'm better than you, I've got the pace on you, and I'm just going to beat you. And they kind of play with that kind of, not thoughtlessness, but no pressure, just focus on getting the job done and playing their football with freedom. And I think that's credit to, of course, Lamine Yamal, most certainly at 16 years old. I mean, we've talked about him before, but he's again performing in the highest level for Spain and probably was one of their best players in the game, to be honest. They really struggled with that, as I said, at times, that threat in the final third, but every time, I mean, Nico Williams was well covered on the left hand side. He kind of struggled a bit. Maybe struggles a bit harsh, but he was well covered, he was well stopped. Joshua Kimmich kind of had his number on that side for Germany, so I don't think Nico Williams got the best out of him in the game. But again, no one's going to be top level every game, so it's not a criticism of Nico Williams, but maybe just something to maybe adapt into the second game. Lamine Yamal, though, rose above it. I mean, let's be honest, he had David Raum on toast the whole game. Jonathan Tah was struggling a slight bit on that left-hand side to deal with him as well, and Lamine Yamal did very, very well on that right flank. As he said, the midfield, very supreme. Rodri, Fabian Ruiz, Pedri. Pedri, of course, not going to be in the game. There is some doubts over Fabian Ruiz, so that could be another worry for Spain to maybe worry about heading into that one. And as I said, Williams well covered in that one. But I have to say, the big talking point, of course, the hosts being knocked out. It's a big threat for Spain. It's something they've got behind them, that they put the hosts out, that they're going to be some team to beat. They're going to be difficult to beat, and they're not going to be easy to kind of get past, and France are going to have that on their radar. Otherwise, they will find it tough and struggle to get through. But I'm sure France, not a naive side at this point. And speaking of France, let's move on to France. They didn't have it as comfortable as maybe Spain did at times against Germany. It was a lot of people saying it was probably the poorest game of the Euro so far. France-Portugal, that quarter-final finished 0-0 after 120 minutes, and France scoring all 5 of their penalties to secure a semi-final place. 5-3 on penalties, France emerged victorious. Mbappe actually went off in half-time and extra time, which is an interesting point. Of course, he got a slight... Well, I mean, the ball was booted into his face, and considering he has a broken nose, there's not much a mask can do about that. So I think Kylian Mbappe rightfully went off at half-time and extra time, but there was a worry that if it went to penalties, would France struggle without him? Clearly not. They kind of rose to the occasion and dealt with it. Their penalties scored by Dembele, Fofana, Koundé, Barcola and Hernandez. Ultimately, the way it went, with France taking the first penalty, although Portugal only scored 3 penalties, they only took 4. They didn't take a fifth because France had already won at that point, so they took 4. So the only player that missed in the shootout for Portugal was João Felix, who hit the post on the left post. But Bernardo Silva and Nuno Mendes scored their 3 penalties. João Felix, the man of the moment, shall we say, in terms of the headlines, missing his penalty. I would say penalty revenge for France. I mean, I mentioned it multiple times in the stream. If you're not watching, if you weren't watching, I'll reiterate that point. Penalty revenge. They lost in the 2020 Euros in the round of 16 on penalties to Switzerland, and then lost on penalties in the World Cup final a year and a half ago to Argentina. So ultimately, maybe penalty revenge for France, ultimately overcoming that kind of seemingly what will I say, that demon, that kind of curse on them, in a sense, on penalties in knockout football. So they overcame that, but ultimately it wasn't an inspiring performance from France. I mean, they struggled. They really looked slow, poor. I mean, I could tell you all different adjectives, but I'll be here all day. They lacked attack and threat, which was a worrying point for me, I would have to say. You know, I've said in previous games they're creating chances, they're making good opportunities, and yes, they had some half-decent attempts in that game. They had some good efforts, some decent efforts on goal. They actually had more shots than Portugal. They had 20 shots in the game, France. So they are still shooting. They're taking shots, 5 of which on target. So that's a 25% shooting accuracy rate in the game. So it's not awful, but in the end, I wouldn't say that it was quite majestic for France in that sense whatsoever. I would say France did kind of struggle at times. I mean, the game didn't really get going until probably the final quarter of the game, about 67 minutes in, when Portugal had 1 or 2 good chances. Then France followed suit at the other end. It really kind of struggled to get going. The energy, the tempo of the game was really slow, was really lethargic, really kind of laboured at times. Both sides struggling. But I'd have to say France were quite negative in moments. Very kind of reverse of what we've seen from France in other tournaments and in other big moments. We saw them kind of drop back a bit, not drop off and not drop and change their system or change their tactics or anything. But I would say France kind of weren't as threatening, and kind of the midfield were maybe a bit deeper than maybe they could have been. I mean, Caoimhan, Camavinga, Conte, a bit kind of digressive, negative, kind of dropping a bit deeper than what we usually see, where France trying to push up, trying to be positive, trying to be progressive, having their midfielders pushing the opposition back. But we didn't see much of that in the game, and that's something I'd have to take a point on. Also, as I said, they were too slow in possession. They were delaying their passes. They were kind of taking 1 or 2 extra touches that weren't needed. And that kind of made the game slower. It brought the tempo of the game down. It really kind of drained any energy out of the game. Ultimately, overall, Portugal had more possession than France in the game. They had more possession in both halves, and in the first half of extra time. The second half of extra time, France actually had the more possession, but not by much. So Portugal were better, had more of the ball. So France, on that front, have digressed and kind of degraded themselves. They didn't sustain possession well enough, not only in the final third, but also in the middle third when they were in those 50-50 battles. They weren't winning those enough. I mean, quite a lot of negatives to take out of that game for France. 1 or 2 positives, that fighting spirit, that defence. I mean, we'll come on to defence in a second. But that fighting spirit to battle back in the penalties without your talisman in Kylian Mbappe, your captain, to get through on penalties in a tough situation where Portugal had looked impenetrable in the last shootout. I mean, there's positives there. And one of those positives, as I said, was their defence. Their defending, again, really solid, putting bodies on the line. I mean, Theo Hernandez, William Saliba, Dayot Upamecano and Jules Koundé, fabulous defending. Mike Maignan, the goalkeeper, wonderful. Made 4 saves in that game. Punched twice, claimed high once. Made 4 clearances. Saved, prevented 1.18 goals in terms of his XG that he saved. So ultimately, a big performance from the French keeper and the French defence. And that is the headline. They defended their way to penalties. and they got through on a 50-50 flip of a coin. It's not promising, it's not positive, it's not impressive, and it's not inspiring at all from France. But we've seen teams dogged fight the hard way. We've seen Italy do it before. We've seen Portugal do it previously. The last two winners of this tournament have done it by being strong defensively. So that is something I would look at for France. They have been strong defensively, and maybe that could just be the difference in the end. Kylian Mbappe, still struggling, as I said, had to go off at half-time and extra time. That broken nose issue, still not playing at his best. That is still irritating him. Of course it will, but the impact is quite drastic at this moment in time. Eduardo Camavinga coming into the side, of course deputising for the suspended Adrien Rabiot. I wouldn't be surprised if he keeps his place in the team because of his good performance, but Rabiot does bring that kind of dynamism to midfield where he's that box to box. I think Camavinga sits a bit deeper, and that's why I think they were maybe a bit negative. That's not his fault. He was trying to get forward. He was offering up himself in the higher positions, but I just think he's a bit more defensively minded than Adrien Rabiot, and I think Rabiot's a bit more attacking minded, and maybe that extra bit of attack in midfield could make the difference. But I do think Camavinga played well. Griezmann didn't have as much of an effect as what I thought he would have. He kind of started on that right wing and then came central behind the likes of Mbappe and Kolo Muani, who started up front, but I don't think that worked. I thought it would work. I thought it would be threatening, but I don't think it was effective enough at linking the play. They're still struggling to settle on that striker. I mean, Kolo Muani came in for Thuram. Thuram then came on a bit later on for Kolo Muani. They're still kind of trying to figure that one out, France, and I think maybe Olivier Giroud could be the answer to your problems. I mean, he's been involved in multiple previous tournaments in those positions, so I think that's something that maybe they could settle upon. I don't know. So far to this point, their striker really struggling to offer in the final third, really struggling to be effective and clinical in that moment. I'd say they were great on penalties. Their penalties were very confident, very kind of composed, very well taken. To be honest, the likes of the pressure on Bradley Barcola, who came on for Kylian Mbappe in extra time, had the pressure at his shoulders, but he delivered really well. Youssouf Fofana as well, another young player, and then the experience in between of Dembele, Koundé and Hernandez. All 5 penalties, very well taken, very controlled, and looked comfortable. They didn't look like Diogo Costa was going to save any of them, and that's credit to the French players, because he saved all 3 penalties against Slovenia. So credit to them on that front. He was quite poor in the shootout, to be honest, Diogo Costa. Maybe that performance that he had in the previous game against Slovenia in the shootout maybe hampered him, I would say, a slight bit. Ultimately, who knows? Maybe that was that mental barrier that he just couldn't come across. I mean, Portugal didn't excite either, so I'm not fully going in on France and saying they were awful and they were this and that and the other and Portugal should have went through. I'm not saying that whatsoever. Portugal were poor as well. I mean, they had very little threat. Again, until the 60th, 70th minute, there was nothing in the game. It was dreadful, to be honest, the quality of the game. And of course, those sad scenes after the penalty shootout of Ronaldo and Pepe kind of embracing each other. It's their last European Championships, those two, and it ended in defeat, which is a sad note for them. But they've done incredible work for Portugal. They've done sensational things on the international stage, and credit to them. You know, maybe not the best of their generation. I mean, Cristiano Ronaldo, obviously one of the best players we've seen in the last 20, 30 years on the international stage, but also at club level. An absolute powerhouse, an absolute machine of a player. But age maybe just catching up with him. He's still in great shape. He's still playing very good. But maybe just his international career has just gone past him, and that could be the end of him internationally, which is sad to see. And Pepe, of course, at 41, high, still on international level. I do not know. Right, so that was the roundup of the first 2 quarterfinals, Spain and France. Patrick in the chat, welcome in. Patrick, thank you very much for joining us. Great to have everybody with us here on the LFS Podcast Euro Special with me, Caoimhan Ferris. I've just rounded up Spain and France's quarterfinals. how they performed and what I thought of them. I'm going to now talk about the semi-final matchup between these two, Spain and France, who will play each other in the semi-finals, and I'm going to give you some quick notes and give my prediction on that front just before we head back to talking about the other two quarter-finals. I want to talk about Spain. They will struggle without those missing players, the likes of Pedri, Carvajal, Morata, maybe Ruiz as well. Some injuries, some suspensions could hamper them for that game. I'll actually look up who is suspended for Spain. Pedri's out through injury. Robin Lenormand, the centre-back as well, is out along with Dani Carvajal and Alvaro Morata after celebrating with a yellow card, so that could be a worry. And then Fabian Ruiz could be out as well for injury, so a lot of issues for Spain in terms of personnel for that one. France, I said it, they need to be more positive and more creative and more kind of front-footed. They haven't been enough, and they weren't enough against Portugal. They were quite negative, quite standoffish. They need to improve on that. They need to build on that, and they need to change that approach if they're going to find a way through. But again, as I said, the last two winners of this tournament have done it through defensive stability, and that is certainly what France have at the moment. Something that Spain might struggle with to a moment. Dani Olmo and Lamine Yamal could be big threats to France. They combined really well for that first goal for Spain that made them kind of click in that final third. They figured out that problem from the first half and fixed it and made it very threatening against Germany in the second half. Spain, so that could be a problem for France in between the lines. As I said, Mbappe, Griezmann, massive threats. Obviously, it goes without saying, but that centre forward could be an issue for France. If they get it right, if they make the right decision, the right call, and get a clinical finisher on there, they could really kind of threaten. I mean, Bradley Barcola impressed off the left-hand side when he came on, but Mbappe plays there, so it's unlikely that he's going to play in that position, unless they go with that similar approach that they went for in the last game, where Kolo Muani and Mbappe played as like a front two at times. Who knows? That could be an idea. We'll see. I did say the French defence, I think, are in better form than Spain's defence. Of course, Spain will be without two of their starting defenders, in Carvajal and Lenormand, for this one. So they'll have Laporte and Cucurella, and then they'll have to pick from a few others. They do have strength and depth off the bench. I mean, Nacho, a quality player as well, a very experienced defender. Off the bench would be a positive move for Spain, but that could be a worry. I think France are in better form defensively and stronger. I think their defence are much more cohesive, and they kind of have that link now where they've played with each other for the previous 5 games in the tournament. They know each other's games inside out. They know how to play with each other, and they know how to keep clean sheets. And we've seen it previously. France take a lot of kind of passion in their defending, and you can see that. That's why they haven't conceded from open play in the tournament yet. So there's a clear defensive stability there. Spain, what was that I wrote? Oh yes, Spain need to be wary out of transition. They need to be stronger. They need to be kind of focused on that. They need to be kind of balanced in that front. Yes, intense press, high press, but don't make sure you don't commit too many bodies like they did against Georgia and in moments against Germany. Commit too many bodies forward and leave yourself fragile and kind of exploitable at the back and vulnerable to the opposition's attack, especially France, who look very strong in transition, who look very strong on the counter-attack, so that could be a worry. The last meeting between these two, by the way, was the 2021 Nations League final. Back in October 2021, France winning by 2-1 on that occasion. The winner scored by Kylian Mbappe. Karim Benzema got the equaliser before it, after Oyarzabal scored the opener for Spain. All 3 players very important for their international sides, 2 of which could be involved in this game, Mbappe and Oyarzabal. And both teams are unbeaten in their last 8 games, which is great form going into a semi-final, and a form you certainly want to take into a semi-final. So we'll see how they do on that front. My prediction, and I don't want to be negative, I don't want to kind of cast aspersions on the game in a sense and kind of curse the game and jinx it, but I do think it will be another penalty shootout. I do think it will come close. I don't think we'll have the 0-0 draw that we had in the Portugal game for France. I do think Spain will score. I do think France will score. So I do think it will be a 1-1 draw. Or even a score draw of some sort. I don't think it'll be 0-0. I do think both teams will score, but I do see France winning on penalties. Spain haven't been in a shootout yet. They have a terrible record from shootouts. Spain, they got put out of the World Cup quarterfinals by Morocco, I think it was, a few years, a year and a half ago on penalties. So Spain have a dreadful record from penalty shootouts. And if it does go to penalties, France just have that edge, in my opinion. Because they've already proved that in the tournament already, but also historically, France maybe slightly the better penalty record, but not by much. But I just think France feel a bit more confident on their penalties at this time, so that's why I think France will just scrape through again, but on penalties. Right, so that's one semi-final down. Let's talk about the quarterfinals, the other two semi-finalists and their quarterfinals, Netherlands and England. Actually, sorry, by the way, just before I move on, I have to remind you of what the details of that semi-final are. Spain-France in Munich tomorrow night, Tuesday, 8 o'clock, and a referee is Slavko Vincic from Slovenia, to 8 o'clock tomorrow night on LFS. Got a bit ahead of myself there. Moving on, now, definitively, to our other semi-final and our next two teams that progress through the quarterfinals. Let's first talk about the Netherlands. Netherlands and England, of course. Let's talk about the Netherlands. The only side out of the quarterfinals to go through in normal time, in the 90 minutes. All three other quarterfinals went at least extra time before they were decided. So the Netherlands doing something that no one else has done, and that is beating a team in the 90 minutes in the quarterfinals. But I wouldn't say that that's an impressive point to take upon, ultimately. Turkey, yes, they were fantastic against Austria, and in moments they were very, very good against the Netherlands in that game, especially in that first half. But I just think the quality and ultimate kind of ability of the Netherlands just shone through and got them through. In the end, I don't have that on the kind of the graphic there, any Netherlands players celebrating. Mainly, that will be the point. They weren't as impressive as they were against Romania, and yes, maybe Turkey a step up in terms of level of opposition, opponent, kind of confidence level. Netherlands didn't really look harmed by Romania for a vast majority of that game. They looked dominant, they looked in control, and they looked comfortable. But against Turkey, I think they struggled a bit more. They weren't as impressive, and they weren't kind of dominant in the game, to be honest. But a positive. That comeback ability, yes, they went behind, but they fought back, they battled back, and they stayed calm and composed. I said their composure and quality shone through. They were composed, and when they went behind, they didn't panic. Similarly with Spain, when they were brought back to level game, they didn't panic, they didn't rush things, they didn't waste time or kind of rush to make silly decisions and kind of ruin their flow in the game. I think the Netherlands kept their composure well and knew that they had the better team, the better quality, and that they've come from behind before to win, of course, against Poland in the group stages, and then Austria, ultimately losing that game, but did kind of battle back against Austria really well in moments. And the quality of the Netherlands. I mean, I said it before in the previous podcast, and I'll say it again. I think Cody Gakpo has been the one of the most impressive players at this tournament. Maybe not kind of a headliner or a player coming into the tournament that would have been kind of a hot pick for top scorer in the tournament, but barring that kind of unfair, I would have to say, that unfair decision for the goal against Turkey, that ultimately the winning goal being given as an own goal rather than a Cody Gakpo finish. I think that's a bit harsh on Gakpo, and he would be the leading scorer if that wasn't the case. He's still the joint top scorer, so he's on 3 goals after 5 appearances. But he is their best player. He's definitely the Netherlands' best player, and possibly one of the best players of the tournament in terms of his performances and his quality, the threat he offers down that left-hand side. I mean, certainly the Netherlands getting the best out of his kind of attributes and his abilities and qualities down that left-hand side. They're making the most of what they've got in Cody Gakpo, and a very impressive player. Ultimately, on the counter, on the contrary to that, Xavi Simons, I think, struggled a bit more in the game. I don't think we've seen much of him in between the lines or kind of link and play. Very centrally kind of suffocated at times. Turkey made closed those spaces down really well, defended Xavi Simons really well. I think he struggled to get into the game. You could see it, the frustration getting on him. He got a yellow card in the game. Not that was an important factor, but I think ultimately the Netherlands were frustrated at times by Turkey. Turkey taking that lead. Again, some of the Kaiden very heavily involved, and a great goal from him, that header at the back post, a wonderful delivery by Arda Güler, another youngster who's performing incredibly well. And then also ultimately the exact same thing happened for the opposing team. The Netherlands equalised from almost the same exact moment. Second phase of a corner and a headed goal to level things. That brought it to 1-1, and then Mert Mulder's ultimate own goal, but I think that was a Cody Gakpo goal, but ultimately given as an own goal, secured the win for the Netherlands. Their defence were not convincing. That's one thing I would say. They weren't convincing as much. I mean, I think Van Dijk got torn. Not well. He defended well, but he was asked a lot more questions. I do think he answered those questions and answered them well, but I don't think his teammates were as impressive. I think Nathan Ake struggled a bit more down that left-hand side. I mean, Mert Mulder on the attack and Arda Güler down that side really kind of threatened him. Yilmaz in that kind of movement, that freedom role, where he was set up as a centre forward, but he did move from left to right, helping out on either wing, and did provide threat in the wide areas. Yilmaz was causing the Netherlands defence a lot of problems in that game, so I wouldn't say the defence was convincing. The Dutch, and I don't think they're not a huge force. We talk about teams having this kind of force of nature, that kind of energy, passion, ability, they don't seem to have that kind of spark at the moment. The Netherlands, they look kind of flat at times, which could be a problem, could be a massive problem for them. Although I think Denzel Dumfries looked strong down that right hand side. He always offers that threat, kind of not playing in that right back role, kind of more as a right winger on that right hand side. I think Bergwijn struggled with that, kind of crowded that area out on that side, which could be a problem they need to fix for the game. If they're playing that back three with Ake, Van Dijk and De Vrij, and then having Dumfries pushing up that right flank, I think they need to kind of balance that out with Dumfries, yes, going down the right, but you need to have something else other than another right winger down that side. You're just going to crowd yourself out and really struggle in that moment, and it kind of too many cooks, as they say. But they were clinical. When they got their chances, they took them. De Vrij and ultimately Gakpo, the own goal. It worked. It helped. I think Steven Bergwijn going off at half-time showed that kind of problem that kind of crowding on that right-hand side didn't work for the Netherlands. Bringing Wout Weghorst on really changed them, made them more threatening, made them more clinical, and caused more of a threat to Turkey. Defensively, having that extra body to target up front. But Turkey failed ultimately to add to their lead, which they did against Austria. That helped them through. I think if they had have made it 2-0, and they had one or two good chances to do so, which they failed to take in the game. If they had have gone 2-0 up, I said it in the commentary, it would have been a different story. Ultimately, they didn't. They kept it at 1-0, and that's a dangerous scoreline. And when the Netherlands score their equaliser, you just think this is going to be a bombardment of the last 15-20 minutes for Turkey to overcome, and can they hold on? They didn't, and they ultimately conceded a second, and that was the end of that. And they kind of felt defeated after that second goal went in. You could just tell that Turkey had kind of felt that they were defeated. They did push, they did try in the late stages, and they had a few good chances. Bart Verbruggen made a very big save late in the game to deny a possible equaliser. Similarly, almost a mirroring of Mert Günok's save for Turkey against Austria a game earlier in the round of 16. Almost identical moment, and almost as late in the game as well. But the positive for the Netherlands in that one is that they got the result. That's what they can say. They came out of it, they're into the semi-final, and they know they need to improve in moments, but they got through, and that's all that matters. Right. Let's talk about who the Netherlands will play then in the semi-final. England, of course, and I wrote a lot of notes here. Not as many as what I wrote for France and Spain, but I did write quite a bit of notes for England. Ultimately, England going through then after their 1-1 draw with Switzerland. They went behind again with that goal from Braylon Bolo tapping at the back post to give Switzerland the lead. Just 5 minutes later, England were on level terms. Bukayo Saka with the equaliser. Really good goal from Saka to level things. And then England winning on penalties. Trent Alexander-Arnold, kind of a scapegoat at times for England, making the difference in the shootout, scoring the ultimate winning penalty to beat England, as France did, scoring all 5 of their penalties. And Switzerland scoring just 3. Switzerland going out on pens again. But one big point that I would make, much improved from England, and it's a lot more of a positive chat about England this time than it was previously. They changed their system. Forcibly changed their system, but they changed their system. They went to a back 3, that 3-4-2-1, the back 3, the 2 wing backs, 2 centre midfielders, and then kind of 1 ahead of them. 2 ahead of them in that box midfield, 2 midfielders and 2 ahead, and then the centre forward in Harry Kane. It worked. It looked more cohesive. It looked stronger. It looked more kind of fluid. They knew what they were doing. They knew what positions they needed to take up, what they kind of needed to do to get the ball from back to front. In transition, they look strong. In controlling the ball, they look strong. I mean, there's a lot more positives about England. Just a simple tactical tweak. I said it multiple times. I said it after every game of England up until that quarter-final. A slight tactical tweak could ultimately change this, and it could swing things in England's favour. The back 3 looked strong. Kyle Walker, John Stones, and of course Ezri Konsa looked very strong, as Mark Guehi did. Mark Guehi, who was suspended for that quarter-final due to yellow card accumulation, but will be back available for the semi-final. But Ezri Konsa stepped up to the mark, as Mark Guehi did in that role previously. Both impressed very well. Bukayo Saka at wing-back looked very strong, very confident. Looked to be a much better inclusion of having him roaming up and down that right flank, getting back defensively, but also threatening on the right hand side. He's been their biggest threat of the tournament so far, I'd say. Bukayo Saka consistently. I would still say that Kieran Trippier is a problem on that left hand side. That's something that I would point to for England. That left wing back role is still something that needs sorted out if they're going to continue with that back 3, which I would recommend, because they looked a lot more defensively strong at times against Switzerland in the game. If they're going to continue with that back 3, which, as I said, I would recommend, I would fix that left wing back position. Either go for a left winger, and the likes of either Anthony Gordon or Barry Eze in that position, as you do with Saka on the right wing back position. Have a winger sit in that role. We've seen many's a winger sit in a wing back role and be effective with that. So maybe Gordon or Eze in that role, or maybe Luke Shaw. Of course, Luke Shaw ultimately a left back, but can play left wing back, of course. Can be very threatening in that system, and he came on and played a number of minutes in the quarter-final late on for England, so that could be an interesting factor. Another big positive, Kobbie Mainoo. In that midfield, I think he looks a really good fit for England. He looks very confident alongside Declan Rice. He's controlled, calm, composed on the ball. I mean, I say those words all the time, but I say them because they're true. He looks really confident on the ball. He's not afraid to run with the ball. He's not afraid to kind of get himself in little duels, little battles. Not afraid of losing the ball. He's always giving himself. He's always showing himself to get the ball, to turn, to kind of turn attack from defence into attack. Get the ball forward, pass it off well. He's got a good passing range. I mean, Kobbie Mainoo looks a really good fit in that England midfield. I do still think they need better creativity and better service to their forward line. I mean, I think Harry Kane struggled at times in that game to really have an impact, a major impact in the final third. Yes, he stayed forward, but that lack of service maybe hampered him a bit. We've seen early in the game Bukayo Saka getting those kind of balls over the top to make those runs in behind. We've seen that kind of fall away as the game went on. So if they keep with that, they could be really threatening with that moment. But I have to say, the moment from Bukayo Saka to get that equaliser in the moment, high pressured, going behind again, that fighting spirit, and Saka's brilliance shone through and got them that equaliser, which was fantastic. But one point I would make for England, they went behind again, which could be a very worrying point for them. That's 2 knockout games in a row where they went behind and at times struggled to bounce back. Yes, they got their equalisers late in games, but from moments. So it could have been a very different story if they didn't have individuals. Now that's kind of circumstantial because they do have very good individuals that can pull a goal from nowhere in big moments. So maybe that's a kind of hollow point in a sense. But I would say going behind is something you don't want to make a habit of, especially in knockout football, because you can run the, as they say, they run the well dry, and there's nothing to come back to when you need it most. There's nothing there for you to grab onto to get out of the game and to get that equaliser, to get that kind of big moment in a game. Although they're stacked with quality, sometimes it may just not go in their favour if they keep going behind. So that's something I'd be wary of, England. But again, I mentioned it in the commentary. They're kind of like Man United of 2021-22 times, where they had to go behind in games to kind of engage and get in that focus mode of now it's really do or die. Whereas it's 0-0, they're kind of calm and kind of relaxed in the game, and maybe a bit too relaxed. But when they go behind, they're energized to get a goal because they know they need it in that sense. So maybe it could be a good thing, but I wouldn't make a habit of going behind, especially in knockout football. But again, moments could be the difference for England. I mean, moments are the key kind of winning idea at international level. A lot of teams win based on moments, based on single plays, on a single individual. I mean, look at Portugal. Ronaldo's got Portugal out of a lot of problems in history through moments. And that's what you have when you've got quality players. Maybe you don't need to play the best football when you've got the best individuals. Another good point I would make about England, their press was much better. I have to say that they looked better in pressing, and I think that change of system, again, I'll go back to it, the change of system made them look more comfortable in what they needed to do, and they looked more clued in on where they need to be at every given moment. Maybe it was just the fact that they matched up and went man for man, in a sense, against Switzerland, in that they had every space covered because they played the exact same system with Switzerland, so that would be something that maybe could harm them against the Netherlands if they stay with that back three. But I do still think that back three is probably the best move because it's probably the best they've looked in the tournament. The box midfield, I talked about it, with Declan Rice and Caoimhan deeper, Bellingham and Foden a bit higher up. That box midfield looks really strong. As I said, they were much higher up the pitch. They looked better in possession, much better control of the game. You can say you have more possession, but you don't have control of the game. The opponent knows exactly what they need to do. But that box midfield kind of muddied the waters for Switzerland a bit, and they kind of struggled at times to get to grips with that. Bellingham was getting on the ball and running forward. Foden was making a problem of himself, a nuisance of himself, shall I say. Him and kind of Caoimhan swapped in moments where Mainu was pushing a bit higher and Foden was dropping a bit deeper, so they were swapping. So they were kind of not getting confused with their positions. They knew when one went a bit deeper, they had to go forward. They kind of kept that shape of the box midfield, so they looked a lot more control with that system. England's, I would still make a slight tweak. I would say that I did mention it, that left wing back role needs to be something needs to happen. Maybe centre forward. I mean, you don't want to bring Harry Kane off after the season he's just had, but has he really looked a massive goal threat for England? Not as much. That's probably what he should do. Maybe that's down to the lack of service, but also he's not a runner in behind. And if England want to go for those runners in behind, I think Ollie Watkins would be a better choice up front for England because he does make those runs and he does kind of have that pace on the counter that Harry Kane really doesn't have at times. So that could be a difference that maybe England could look upon, but I don't think Gareth Southgate will make that change. I think he's very kind of loyal to Harry Kane, and maybe rightfully so. But we'll see. Ultimately, I thought Switzerland in the game, I mean, all the talk about England and how they've improved, but I do think Switzerland were disappointing in that first half. Their midfield looked, void of all sort of clue as to what to do. I mean, Remo Freuler and Granit Xhaka were marched all over the pitch in that first half. They didn't have much control. They fixed it in the second half. They looked a lot better in the second half when they did kind of push their back three up a bit more with Cher as right centre back. And Ricardo Rodriguez helping the attack a bit more. It did push England back a bit, especially in that second half. I think they looked more controlled and gave more space to Granit Xhaka and Remo Freuler to kind of possess the ball and to spring the ball about and make those runs in the midfield that they were struggling to make in the first half. But again, it comes down to penalties where Switzerland were beaten. They got put out of the quarter-final stage of the last Euros on penalties to Spain in the quarter-finals. So again, maybe that old kind of adage of they can get so far, but they just can't seem to get past the quarter-finals. 5 attempts now at a quarter-final at an international tournament for Switzerland, and on all 5 occasions they've exited at the quarter-final stage. They've never been in a semi-final of an international tournament ever before. And that's 2 back-to-back quarter-finals in the Euros. Their only 2 quarter-final appearances, and both exiting on penalties to Spain and England, respectively. Ultimately, I would say that Switzerland were slightly disappointing in the game, but as I said, they were better in the second half. England, better individuals, better in moments, and ultimately winning on penalties. All 5 penalty takers for England, I have to say, were very confident. And I will go back to this point, because England lost the Euro 2020 on penalties to Italy in the final at Wembley, and they were criticised. They were massively, massively victimised, and you can guess what players were victimised. Jadon Sancho, Marcus Rashford and Bukayo Saka. What do all 3 of those players have in common? They are black players. Ultimately, 4 of England's 5 penalty takers were black players, or players that are mixed race. Jude Bellingham, Bukayo Saka, Ivan Toney and Trent Alexander-Arnold. That is redemption. That is what strong mentality is. And those players maybe struggled, maybe had the worst time of their lives after that penalty shootout in 2020. But to bounce back, to take that pressure on your shoulders again after knowing what missing a penalty means, and those little trolls came out of the woodwork, and those racist bigots, those horrible people that only find themselves on social media, came out of the woodwork in that Euros final. Well, they will be the ones celebrating and throwing their beer around the pubs around England after that penalty shootout. They will be the ones that will be hidden because they were silenced by those England players. And credit to all the players of the penalties. I mean, every player has pressure on penalties. England don't have a great record, but especially, I would say, a special mention to Bukayo Saka, because he missed a penalty in the Euros final and he stood up and scored his penalty, and it's a wonderful penalty, by the way. But he stood up to those, and that mentality to bounce back, to battle back, and to show your true quality and not let it hurt you and not let it get to you and kind of overcome you is fantastic. And both Marcus Rashford and Jadon Sancho made their opinions known about that after the shootout. But those people, keep them in their boxes because we don't want them in football, especially not for those moments, especially because they only make themselves known on social media. They'll never say anything out loud. They'll never say anything in person, and that just shows to the true person that they are. Cowards, really. But all 5 penalties, back to the point, for England were very, very well taken. As I said, considering their recent history in penalties and their kind of historics in penalties. I mean, Gareth Southgate missing that penalty at Euro 96 will always be harked back to if England miss a penalty in a shootout and go out on penalties, but that could be a problem. Let's quickly talk about the semi-final matchup just before I leave you. Excuse me. England's then going through to face the Netherlands in the semi-final, and I'm going to quickly give you the information, my thoughts previewing this game, and also my prediction as well. Cody Gakpo will be a huge threat for the Netherlands. I mean, it goes without saying, he's been, as I said, one of the best players of the tournament so far, so he will be a threat. He will be a problem for England, and they'll need to get to grips with that. But I think down that right-hand side, they have good cover in Saka and Walker, who have great pace, good recovery pace, and good strength to hold off Gakpo, but we'll see how that deals with. Donyell Malen scored both of his goals from the bench, so if he does make an appearance from the bench, that could be a problem for England to deal with a bit later on in the game. That could be interesting at the moment. As I said, they need to fix that left wing-back position, England. Maybe a Gordon or an Eze in the similar role of Saka. Winger played... winger kind of deputising at left wing, a wing back. They do need that kind of pace, that threat, that left-footed player on that left-hand side to maintain that balance. which I still think was struggling in that game in moments. So that could be fixed. Or Luke Shaw, of course, we'll see how fit he is, whether he is fit enough to start that game. We will find out. More service to Harry Kane. If they're going to keep Harry Kane in the team, England need to find more service to him. Bellingham and Foden will be huge for England. I mean, ball carriers driving at the defence of the Netherlands will be a problem. And remember, the Dutch defence, Nathan Ake and Virgil van Dijk will need to watch themselves, because if they need to be careful in moments. They're on a yellow card, so they need to be wary of that moment. Of course, both teams not having any suspended players for yellow cards heading into this one. The Netherlands' defence is more vulnerable than England's, in my opinion. I don't think England look as vulnerable defensively as the Netherlands do, and maybe that's the change of system that helped them, but even before that their defence looks strong. So even if they do go to a back four England, I don't think they will be threatened as much defensively. So that's something the Netherlands really need to get to grips with. Maybe they'll match up with England, maybe they'll go to a back three in moments, who knows, we'll see. And if they do stick with that back four, the Netherlands, and England go with the back three, that could be an interesting point. I mentioned it a bit earlier on. England's not struggled against a back four as they have against a back three/back five. So if they stick with that, the Netherlands, that could be an interesting point if there is a difference in system, because England looked more comfortable when they played against a back three, when they were playing a back three themselves, when they matched their system up to their opposition. So if they go for that difference in approach and in system, that could be a difference in the game. The last meeting between these two also came in the Nations League. It was a 2019 Nations League semi-final, and the Netherlands came out 3-1 winners on that occasion. That was 4.5 years ago. That was their last competitive meeting. Marcus Rashford opened the scoring from the penalty spot for England, but all three goals following came from the Netherlands. Matthijs de Ligt levelled before it was brought to extra time. Kyle Walker's own goal and Quincy Promise's third for the Netherlands secured victory in that semi-final. They went on to lose the final to Portugal, Netherlands on that front. And they have both scored in 5 of their last 6 head-to-head meetings. So we're expecting goals from these two teams, because they have both scored in 5 of their last 6 meetings with each other, which could be very intriguing with a difference in results. England, not the best of records against the Netherlands. Ultimately, the Netherlands probably edging the record. The Netherlands won 3 of the last 5 between the sides, but 4 of which were international friendlies. England winning 1 of those last 5 and drawing 1 of those international friendlies 2-2. But England's last win, competitive win against the Netherlands, came in the Euros in 1996, when they won by 4-1. So a long time ago, and that was in the group at Euro 96. The prediction for me then, I'm predicting, you might have guessed it, another penalty shootout. I'm predicting another shootout incoming here. And I do think England will have the benefit. Again, I'll harp back to the point that Spain and France had. The point I had between Spain and France. France, I think, are confident. They've taken penalties. They've scored all their penalties. They look confident. England, I would go for the exact same point. They both look confident. Or they look confident. They've taken penalties. They have that behind them now. They know that they can be promising in penalty shootouts. They know they're not kind of the teams of before where they have that mental block. But again, we don't know. The Netherlands untested on penalties, same as Spain against France. So we'll see. But I do think England will win on penalties after a 2-2 draw in the 120 minutes. So I'm expecting goals, but I'm also expecting a penalty shootout victory for England. So from my predictions, I'm predicting a France-England final, which they were the top 2 favourite teams heading into the tournament, so you never know. But I'm expecting a France-England final. There's nothing to say that that would be the case. There's nothing to say that that is what is coming, but I do expect that to be the case. Based on what I've seen so far, and if it does go to penalties, I would back France and England to go through on penalties, but again, Spain and the Netherlands untested, so you never know. Confirmation then, Netherlands-England, that is in Dortmund, Signal Iduna Park, Borussia Dortmund's stadium. That's on Wednesday night, 8 o'clock, and our referee is German referee Felix Zweier for that one. So that is Wednesday night on LFS. Right, that is my Euros quarter-final roundup and my semi-final preview for Euro 2024. The semi-finals, both live on LFS, including the live final, which is 6 days away this Sunday, 8 o'clock, live from the Olympiastadion in Berlin. And we'll have both semi-finals, as I said, with live watch-along commentary and the live final here on LFS. First of which, as I said, Spain and France. Both looking for a place in the Euros final. The 2008 and 2012 champions, Spain, the only team to go back-to-back. No one's going to be going back-to-back. We will have a new winner of this tournament. Will it be Spain booking their place in the final, or will France, after recent events, come out on top and defend their way to the final? We never know. We'll see. France, of course, the 2016 finalists and the 1984 and 2000 winners. So they've been in finals previously. They've been in 3 of the last 4 international tournament finals, France. 2016, 2018 World Cup and the 2022 World Cup. They only missed the 2020 Euros final out of the last 4 international tournament finals. So France have that ability to get the job done in semi-finals. That's tomorrow night, and then on Wednesday night we will have Netherlands against England. Right, that is the LFS podcast. Thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and turn on post notifications if you haven't done so already. It'd be greatly appreciated. We're going to carry you right through to the end of the Euros, and then next season on the way. Some more information to come about that this week, so we'll let you know about that, about the new season. But for now, thank you very much for watching. Great to have you with us. And also don't forget to follow us on socials as well, on X, Instagram and TikTok. All the links and handles you need are on our YouTube page and also on our live streams as well for our games. That is it for me, Kevin Ferris. Until next time, where we'll be previewing the final this Friday. Don't want to miss it. Friday, 4 o'clock, we will be previewing the final. Until then, have a great afternoon. Bye-bye.